everybody. Thank you for coming.
Good morning.
This is my second time with the Legion. Also, my name is Peter Tiller. I was a first sergeant, United States Army, 32 years. Enjoyed what I was doing. Sometimes I didn't like it, but you know what? Sometimes you don't like a lot of things. So they say start off with a joke or a story. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. The snow on Veterans Day, for some reason, follows me. Last year was beautiful, but years ago, I'd come down from Fort Drum and I was doing a honor guard for the Stanwix Men's Club in Rome. And it was windy and snotty and nasty and everything else. We went out there for 10 minutes about it. By the time we came back in, we were frozen. And then the Stanwix Men's Club, all veterans, proceeded to get my honor guard smashed. So after 2 drinks, I realized what they were trying to do. And somebody had to drive the van back up, so I stopped drinking and enjoyed the day anyway, and then took a bunch of sick soldiers back up to Fort Drum. And my commander's like, what happened? Oh, they ran into a beer keg, I told you. Another time was just outside of Oswego, and again from Fort Drum. The first time the men's Stanwix Club went so well, I said to the commander, I said, they're going to start calling us and asking us, because Fort Drum was just opening up. The next year Oswego called, and if you guys know anything about what happened up there just last night, they got like 8 inches of snow, and we happened to be doing an honor guard. And about 4 inches of snow as another 4 inches fell on us in about 10 minutes. And took us inside. My guys are like, are you driving? I said, yeah, I'm driving. And they proceeded to get them young men smashed again. So, but Veterans Day is pretty important. As far as recognizing our veterans, a lot of people. This is my grandson, Peter Joshua. And anyway, Veterans Day is one of those days that all veterans celebrate, and you celebrate all veterans, whether they're deceased or whether they're all celebrated. Memorial Day, on the other hand, is for the deceased veterans. A brief history on Veterans Day and why. As everybody knows, the end of World War I, 11/11/1919. Originally known as Armistice Day, for the commemoration of the end of World War I, became a federal holiday in 1938, and again in 1954 after Korea and World War II, by President Eisenhower and Congress, changed it to Veterans Day because it was known as Armistice Day up until then. In 1971, it was briefly returned back to November 11th after they decided that in a couple years before that, Congress decided they were going to have it on the 4th Monday of October. And of course, the American Legion and several other organizations, veteran organizations, said, wait, what are you doing? There's a reason why it's 11/11 at 11. And of course, Congress, most of them can't recognize how important it is to serve the country, because let's face it, they serve their interest. So they finally moved it back and decided that, okay, the historical significance was more important than what day we decided to do it on. Key milestones are 1918, Armistice signed, 1919, first anniversary celebrated of Armistice Day, 1926, a resolution that was passed to make it an annual holiday.
Very true.
And 1938, it became a federal holiday. 1954, veterans organizations asked to change to Veterans Day, and President Eisenhower signed it. The 4th Monday of October, 1971, as I mentioned, and in 1975, President Ford returns the 11/11, effective 1978, to Veterans Day. So it's gone through a little bit of a rigmarole, probably more than an important day like this should go through, but it did. When I Googled veterans, it came up and it said veterans have 5 things that are really 5 words to explain a veteran. experienced. Whether you've been to combat or whether you're sitting doing your job and here in the United States or around the world, you get some unbelievable experiences. You get to experience other cultures, you get experience of how to lead, you get experiences of how to just think on your own. A lot of times I would leave soldiers and say, all right, I'm going here, going there, knowing that I can depend on them soldiers. You got discipline, and again, that's that part where if I leave, I don't have to be there looking over the top of them all the time. They're seasoned. They get experience early in life. A lot of times you'll see a veteran will get out, and the first thing they want to do is start looking at starting a family, extending their education, buying a home. And that's one of the reasons actually why the VA came up with the home buying process, VA mortgages, was because veterans tend to want to rush life a little bit more at the very beginning. And then towards the end, right, gentlemen, we want to just sit and do absolutely nothing. and come and yeah, come here and have people pat us on the back and say thank you for your service. It's funny, when I Googled, they said, well, it's other things you can say to veterans about their service. Well, you know what? I think thank you for your service is enough. And don't change it. We might be a little embarrassed sometimes. We might be in a hurry and just turn and say, okay, thank you. But most of the time, we just appreciate hearing it. And if you know a Vietnam veteran, they will really appreciate hearing it. And so will Korean War veterans, because they didn't get the thank you for your service when you got home. Courageous. I think some of us get embarrassed when you say, oh, you know, I couldn't have the courage to do what you did. Yeah, you would. I didn't have the courage to be a farmer. That was my family's career, and that's not what I wanted to do. I couldn't drive a bus. So you pick what you pick, be proud of what you do. I know we are. And then the last thing is resilient. We tend to be a little bit more adaptive to what goes on around us and how to change. The other part of Veterans Day, you'll see these people selling the little poppy flowers. And for those of you that are unaware of the history of that, is during World War I, there was a poem written in Flanders Fields, and one of the lines is, in Flanders Fields, they blew between the crosses. So that little poppy flower is actually started after World War I as kind of an honor. And a lot of times the veterans will hang them from the rear view mirror, even though here in New York State you're not supposed to hang anything from your rear view mirror. Mine's been in my truck since 2015 when I bought it, and the vehicle that I owned before that, and ever since 1977 there's been a little red poppy hanging in my truck. And if you want to give me a ticket for that, I'm sure there's not a judge in New York State wouldn't throw it out. So, I covered the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Gave you my brief history. I'm going to tell you a little bit, real quick, on some of the Medal of Honor winners here in America. We've had 3,536. It started in 1863 during the Civil War. The first award actually given for heroism by the military was actually the Purple Heart. Today, that anybody that's been wounded, we call it the enemy's BOGO badge, because they got us. Mine was a roadside bomb. You know, sometimes you have a good day, sometimes you don't. You know, you play with bombs and bullets, you might get hurt. There's 19 Medal of Honor recipients have actually gotten it twice. I can't imagine how you could earn the Medal of Honor twice when you hear some of the stories that these Medal of Honor winners have done. During my lifetime, I've met 56 Medal of Honor winners. And it was at a parade in Saratoga, Springs of all places, and it was a Medal of Honor parade. And the one that I always think about is General Brady, Brigadier General. That's 2 stars. But when he earned his Medal of Honor, he was a major for Medevac unit in Vietnam. And one morning he got a call, said, we need you to go in and rescue a Vietnamese company that was pinned down. And they had a lot of wounded. Well, if you know anything about Medevacs, that big red cross was just a target for the Viet Cong to shoot at. And it's funny because I was talking to a Huey Medevac crew chief the other night at the veterans dinner for ClearPath, and he was telling me about some of the stuff. He'd been shot down 3 times over his 1.5 years in Vietnam. And the last one kind of ended his career, but it also ended his time in Vietnam because he had to come home and recover. And he's still recovering to this day. But this General Brady, at the time, got the phone call and he said, all right, I'll go. Well, one of the problems was the reason why the other helicopters wouldn't go in there is it was so foggy nobody could see. Well, if you know anything about helicopters,